Let's bring in our guest. He is coming to us live right now after a hard day at work and seeing a lot of the news. Jacob Hornberger. Welcome, Jacob. How are you?
Well, you forgot to mention the headache that you give me every single time with that mind meld. I mean, this is not a painless operation, Gard. Hey, I mean, it hurts. It hurts.
I'll have to tell you sometime when I was working at Star Trek Voyager, Jacob, I had an idea for that would have sort of wrapped up the entire reason, had a big plot behind the whole reason that the Voyager crew was in a certain section of space and things like that. And I never got to pitch it, and it had to do with a mind meld. So I'll tell you about that sometime. That was interesting. Welcome, my friend, and thank you so much for being here. A mentor, an ally, and a man who hopefully can add perspective. Your expertise is really welcome tonight, Jacob. Obviously, you heard what Donald Trump has been saying over the past weeks and what he's been doing, but particularly with his threat today. And I'd love to get your assessment of it, and then maybe some other things you might want to add from your perspective.
Yeah, well, first of all, it's great to be back here. I always have fun interacting with you, Gard. I mean, you make me feel like a moderate, man. I mean, it's like I want to thank you for that. Yeah, it's an interesting situation here because as libertarians, we know we can't change the outcome of what Trump's going to do, and we sort of are observers of this. And I find it fascinating just to watch this, and of course condemn it and criticize it. But it is fascinating to be a libertarian because at least we have a grip on reality. We understand how this world works. And that's compared to people that are still, their minds are still encased with the indoctrination that they received in the public school system. They still buy into all this nonsense of Iraq was coming to get us, like Saddam was coming to get us, like the communists were coming to get us. It's just a great big evil racket. It's not just Trump. It's the whole machinery of the national security establishment, which I contend is like an evil octopus that's just entwined itself within the federal government with all its tentacles over decades.
Yeah.
And it's a classic case of evil, as I've been mentioning in my series, The Evil Within, using seducing good people, Christians, to advance evil unwittingly.
That was, I'm so glad. And as you know, in my emails, I mentioned I would love to talk to you about your series, The Evil Within, which over at the YouTube channel for Foundation, Future Freedom Foundation, everybody go to that YouTube channel. And you can also, if you sign up for the emails from fff.org, you'll receive the links with the daily emails. And it is one of the best resources out there, everybody. So check it out, please. But Jacob started up a series. He's got multiple episodes intermixed with his libertarian angle, with Richard Ebeling and other things like the Trump Watch videos and so on, which each one has a different facet to something. And the themes that you've put together on that, really, really good. It really gives you the face of evil through these generations, because it's this feedback loop of the incentives, the dark incentives that once, as Robert Higgs noted, once they come up with some justification or boogeyman to say there's an emergency, they add another layer of the bureaucracy that incentivizes people to keep that layer going, and then they keep expanding. It's amazing.
Oh, it's just a racket. And the problem with the racket is not only the death and suffering that they wreak in different parts of the world, but it's the destruction of our own liberty and our well-being here. I mean, people get so embroiled in all this that they forget the consequences for themselves. Who's talking about liberty in America in the context of what's going on in Iran and the annihilation of civilization over there and going to destroy all the bridges and the power plants? Who's talking about abolishing the TSA, Homeland Security, which is this weird militarist organization that brings to mind Starship Troopers, and who's talking about getting rid of the Patriot Act and all the assaults and destruction of liberty here at home? Nobody
isn't it,
will.
it strikes me as amazing. I remember when they first started with the TSA, just to pinpoint on that one, as a a little blossom within that great garden that you laid out there. I remember telling people, I said, look, if you think that the federal government has a place in controlling the air routes, you need to look at how it started, which was by an errant reading of the postal roads that are in the Constitution. They said, we'll create postal roads in the air. And then they had lighted air routes, and they had those big cement arrows. And you probably remember when you were a kid, and they blocked all the private air carriers from going on those routes. And then from there, people like Roosevelt knew that they could hand money to various municipal and state politicians to say, we kind of control the air routes, so we could steer an air route towards your place and make a hub in a wonderful city where the weather's always great of Chicago. Wouldn't that be great? And that's, and so the whole thing has no market incentives at all. And then they drop these people contrary to the Fourth Amendment. It's so obvious. Every moment of the day, they're placing their hands on people without a judicial warrant. And they're telling people, we're going to intercede between you and the private carrier with whom you've contracted. So I tried to tell people, I was like, look, if you think that they have some rationale, some excuse to get into the airports because they hand out federal money, going back to Roosevelt and his ridiculous stuff. And Amity Shlaes did a great job on her book, her book, The Forgotten Man. I remember meeting her at FEE years ago, and she was so wonderful. And I say, if you think that that's the case, then because they provide highway funds, they could come out onto your driveway, stand right in front of your driveway and say, well, your town got some funds to get out onto this road, so you better pass this metal detection test. It's absurd. And now we literally are having Republicans arguing about, and this is how far it's come. Fox News hosts are saying, oh, boy, it's a good thing they're putting ICE agents instead of the TSA. It's like, do you see how far you've come? It's astounding. They've become so used to the police state. It's incredible.
Oh, it becomes normalized. The tyranny becomes normalized, and then it becomes amplified. So when they're over there killing people over in the Middle East, which they've been doing for decades, or in Afghanistan or Iraq or wherever, then they say, oh, now we really need to keep you safe from all the retaliation that might come from all this. And so our freedom is destroyed even more, because now they say we have to have these destructions of freedom for the next 10 years at least. They tell Americans, be careful about being a tourist in Europe, because some angry person that's lost his family in these bombings may come and shoot you. This is no way to live. This is absolutely no way to live. And yet they are making it worse for us. Not to mention $38 trillion in debt. They say, oh, we saved this pilot. I'd like to know how much that plane cost. Or those two planes cost. Yeah. More debt. They're talking about a $1.5 trillion budget for the Pentagon, the CIA, the NSA. That is money that comes out of our pockets. The more money they take out of our pockets, the less we have to live our lives on.
Yeah. And that systematic approach is so important. As you know, when you're dealing in economics, you're talking about political philosophy, it all ties together. So if I'm in front of some students, I'll say, we're talking about liquidity here. If you, like Bastiat said with the broken window fallacy, if you are forced to spend money over here, that leaves an opportunity cost. You're never going to know what could have been fostered and helped to grow over here, and how that could have had ripple effects. And it really, when you talk the golden rule and you talk about peace, and I remember my father, and I appreciate so much every time I talk to you, you always mention, like, boy, you were lucky to have a dad like that, and I think about it so much, Jacob, how fortunate I really was. Just over around the corner here from our bunker here in Moscow, my dad's little library is located, and he had the annotated human action where he wrote in the margins and stuff. And it was great. And I would have conversations with him about things. And I think I might have mentioned, I was reading like Money Mischief or something one time that, from Friedman when I was a teenager. And Friedman had used an errant example for discussing inflation in one of his books. He said, well, let's say the gasoline becomes more scarce. The price of gasoline goes up. That will cause inflation because it will have an effect on all the prices. I was like, Dad, that actually wouldn't cause inflation. Inflation is the inflation of the money supply. That would cause a price increase, but it wouldn't necessarily allow for the definition to be called inflation. He goes, that's right. I was like, what you're doing there is your money is now leveraging something that's it's sort of almost indescribable. It's the access to the product that's more scarce. He said, yeah, that's exactly it. And I was like, yeah, it's not buying less. It's just buying a quantity of something that right now is less important, which is availability of the product. And I think to myself, every generation we have these people going all the way back to people like Jefferson and others who tried to tell us about these things. But yet the political machine incentivizes dismissing that. Don't talk about those things. And if I can, I'd like to refer to your piece. If I can I show this on the screen? Your piece today, Why Should Trump Worry About War Crimes?
Yeah, sure.
Oh, great. Okay, that's my way of introduction, because you got me thinking about history. And in fact, I think you even opened with the Stone Age. So yeah, it's let's go to this, everybody. Check this out. So we've got this. Why should Trump worry about war crimes? President Trump is warning Iran that the whole civilization will die if Iranian leaders fail to open the Strait of Hormuz by 8 p.m. tonight. He's promising to bomb power plants, bridges, and other infrastructure with the aim of sending Iran back to the Stone Age. Now, I'm going to put a little thumbtack there to just ask you a little bit later about something I put in one of my emails, which is the distinction between civilian infrastructure and so-called government infrastructure, and how, because of fascism, those are sort of bled together in many ways in people's minds. Love to get your comments. But I just want to ask you this, Jacob. You said, meanwhile, the Israeli government, which is serving as a partner in the U.S. war in Iran, isn't waiting for Trump's deadline. It is already bombing universities, pharmaceuticals, and infrastructure within the country. And that's exactly how I started the program. Commentators are pointing out that if Trump follows through with his vow, he and the Pentagon will be committing a war crime because they will be attacking the civilian population rather than military targets. And you said, but why should Trump worry about that? He knows full well that he can commit any act he wants, including criminal acts, and will not be held to account for it. The same, of course, holds true for the Pentagon, the CIA, and the rest of the national security establishment. I'm not going to read any more right now, Jacob, because that really affected me when I saw that earlier. And I'd love for you to, talk to people about, how you felt about that as you worked through this, as you wrote it.
Well, it's based in part on my law background, is that to hold somebody responsible for any crime, a war crime or a regular crime, you have to ask yourself, how's that work? Hold them responsible in what way? Well, ordinarily a criminal way, like a criminal prosecution. So as I pointed out in my article, that's just not going to happen. Trump, the only entity that could do that would be the Justice Department and the federal judiciary. They would get a grand jury indictment indicting Trump and these pilots, or I use another example, these killings in the Caribbean of those boat people, which is a purely criminal act. The U.S. officials don't have the authority to just kill people. They have to take them into custody and bring them for trial. That's our system of government.
Right.
But so the Justice Department is never going to get a grand jury to indict. And they're not going to ask a grand jury to indict. And if you have a runaway grand jury, which what they're called, that indicts anyway, despite what the U.S. attorney in that district wants, the federal judge is going to immediately grant a motion to dismiss. If he doesn't, the Supreme Court will step in and say that Trump's immune from anything he does. The Pentagon, the CIA, the NSA, they're all immune. So they can do anything they want and nothing can happen. Now there's impeachment, but Trump controls both houses of Congress. Even if he loses the House and they impeach him there, they'd never be able to get 2/3 in the Senate to convict him because his toadies are in the Senate, controlling the Senate.
Yeah.
So those are the only two things. The International Criminal Court, which is prosecuting the former president of the Philippines, Rodrigo Duterte, for ordering the killing of drug war suspects without trial. They are members of the International Criminal Court. The U.S. government has always refused to submit to the jurisdiction of the International Criminal Court. So what's left, Gardner? I mean, he knows that he can do whatever he wants, and there's nothing that's going to hold him to account for this in terms of criminal prosecution or removal from office.
It's astounding. The double standards just are breathtaking. As you mentioned with the Philippines example, Donald Trump is engaging in exactly the same type of behavior extra nationally, internationally, and doing that, and won't be prosecuted. And at the same time that he's offering the pablum about opposing drugs as the so-called rationale for extrajudicial murder in the Caribbean and Eastern Pacific, he's releasing the former president of Honduras who had been convicted of smuggling coke. It's nuts. I mean, I don't know if he was getting advice from Hunter Biden or what, sorry to say for Hunter Biden's troubles, but I mean, really, it's just, it really is like a circus. It's like Rod Serling could have written this, it's like somebody's going around in the merry-go-round. It's nuts.
Well, there's another interesting twist to this too. And that is that there is this principle called extraterritoriality, where nations are now claiming the authority to indict and prosecute leaders in foreign countries who kill their citizens in that their own country. And ordinarily, they don't have jurisdiction to do that. The only one that has jurisdiction is the country where the murder took place. But when Augusto Pinochet, the dictator of Chile, whose forces killed numerous people from different nations, he flew to Great Britain for medical treatment. Spain indicted him for having killed Spanish citizens there in Chile. And a British court upheld this principle that, Spain can try you. And so they were going to ship him to Spain. At the last minute, they gave him a medical leave to return to Chile. But Trump has to know this. This is what I find fascinating, is that after Trump leaves office, wherever he travels, he has to worry about that, because Colombia could indict him for killing Colombian citizens. Venezuela could indict him. And so you've got this principle that I would think he'd be concerned about. And so why isn't he concerned? Well, I think because there's a possibility he doesn't intend to leave office. And he's made jokes about that, but I'm not so sure it's all a joke.
It's very strange. The psychology of it is bizarre. Maybe he thinks since he's going to be head of his Gaza reconstruction thing, if that ever comes through, he'll move to his Riviera on the Palestinian shore and live there as an Israeli citizen or something. I don't know. It's bizarre. And the other thing that gets me about this is the weird mentality of people. And I really wasn't around in the Cuban Missile Crisis at all, obviously. But, you've seen various times where Americans have risen up against things that the government was doing to such an extent that they became social zeitgeists. And I've seen a few of these things, and then I believed certain things and then had my eyes open, for example, about Iran, once I found out about what the United States had been doing in the 1950s, and then even earlier than that with the British, their influence in the end of the imperial era. So you learn these things. But as a person who's seen these things, are you ever I'm just blown away right now by the idea that people can support what Israel is doing, what Trump is doing. So Israel and Gaza and Palestine, and we can talk about the immigration, the way that the wool's been pulled over people's eyes there. It's just astounding to me. I don't understand how so many people can get caught up in this. And then the final thing is, even if one doesn't like the Iranian government, what does that have to do with you? I don't understand. Where do you get the moral authority to tell your neighbor, I don't like the fact that somebody across the world mistreats someone and threatens someone in my eyes. So I'm going to threaten you and make sure you give me money so I can have that changed. I don't get that.
Well, and it's threatening the people of Iran with horrific actions if they don't remove their own government. They're disarmed. How are they going to remove their own government? But, those 1,700 civilians, we don't know how many Iranian soldiers have been killed, but I guarantee those 1,700 civilians, they're not going to enjoy any fruits of anything. They're dead.
Right.
And so there's this cavalier attitude that life over there just doesn't matter. They're willing to sacrifice any number of Iranians for the sake of regime change. I mean, that's really what this is all about, is that trying to do what they've done with Venezuela, for example, which is really weird. They're partnering with this socialist, communist, narco-terrorist regime that's following orders. That's what they wanted in Iran, either total regime change where a local toady becomes a toady for the U.S. government, or that the current regime becomes a toady. And what fascinates me is that they haven't done that. I mean, I had never had any doubts that this conquest was going to be a cakewalk. This is a third world country, hollowed out by decades of sanctions. They never stood a chance militarily. But the fact that they didn't surrender and haven't surrendered, I never saw that coming, or this, hanging in there, no matter how many people, how many leaders the Israelis assassinate, they're just saying we're still not going to surrender. I just find it fascinating.
I go through, sometimes I do a lot of my work on my own, and sometimes I don't know how the people at Anti-War handle it. People like Dave DeCamp and others. I'm friends with Angela Keaton over there, and every day looking at this terrible stuff in so many places. And, Anti-War has been one of the few groups that's been reporting on what was going on in Somalia. And it's devastating. Sometimes you sit there and you say, I'm just watching this and I can't imagine what those people must be experiencing. And the thing that you bring up, Jacob, that I think is important is when you talk about Venezuela, you talk about these other countries. I think a lot of times over my generations, I came out of the anti-communist USSR, United States. 1984 is approaching, the Olympics, all these things. And then Reagan comes in, they tear down the wall. It's an amazing achievement. I have a piece of the Berlin Wall that I got through Laissez-Faire Books. I think they were selling the pieces of the wall. And, some of the amazing things that people went through to survive and reunite with families. And that distinction between American Western freedom and recognition of natural rights and the United States system and Soviet communism. And of course, Soviet communism and fascism. Fascism, they told us in school, was essentially to hate other people, different people. But what they didn't tell us was that it's essentially just individualism and voluntary action versus collectivism. And the collectivism has different types of labels and different approaches for the state to grow and form the collective, but it's all collectivism, whether it's fascism or socialism, national socialism, whatever it is, it's the state versus the individual and voluntary action. It's the gang versus freedom. And these sorts of essential root lessons, getting radical, getting to the root, are something that I think I wish I had learned in school earlier, and it took my dad to sort of teach me. And that's why what you do at FFF is so important. And your articles, your pieces, and your videos do that. What you do with Richard does that, because you allow people to see these windows on other philosophers, other names, other books, other references, so that people can get some of that really satisfying nutrition, I think, to see that. Do you think that I'm off in saying really what we're talking about here is the eternal struggle between individual and voluntary action and the various forms of collectivism that are out there?
Not in the least. And there's this notion that if there's an evil regime like in Iran, to fight that regime bombing it and so forth, that makes the United States good. Well, no, you can have evil opposing evil. And this is what I'm arguing, is that we have evil institutions that were never part of the America's governmental system. A national security state was not our founding governmental system. It was a limited government republic. Foreign interventionism was never part of our founding system. It is now. But you raise such a deeply profound issue of why is it that so many people support this? It really is an amazing thing. And but I can understand it. I mean, when I was a kid growing up, a common question was, how could Germans overwhelmingly support Hitler and the Nazi regime? What both in the 30s and then in the war? Why'd this happen? Can't they just see that Hitler's an evil guy? Can't they just see that all this is evil? So the question is, why? Why do you have a small group like the White Rose opposing them and considered to be bad people within Germany? Well, I can relate to these people's mindset. These are good people. I know people that are unconditionally supporting Trump, blindly supporting this war, buying into that this is a religious war, this is Islam again. They don't see it as a racket. And I think that's one of the things that distinguishes us libertarians from non-libertarians. We have broken free. Before I discovered libertarianism, I bought into all this. I mean, fighting the communists in Vietnam, and the welfare state is designed to help the poor. If you oppose the welfare state, you hate the poor. You're selfish. You're self-centered. I discovered libertarianism, and in a pure, uncompromising sense, I could feel this inches thick encasement of my mind from indoctrination in the public government schools I went to cracking apart.
Right.
And so I figured when I started FFF, that's what I wanted. I wanted a battering ram against people that have their minds encased. And some of them I still can't crack through. It's like, wow. But it's hard for me to be too harsh on them because I was there with them. Through the grace of God, I was able to break free of this. And that's what distinguishes, I think, libertarians. But take John Kennedy. You mentioned the Cuban Missile Crisis. This is a guy that comes into office as a standard Cold Warrior. He falls for the racket. The Reds are coming. Reds are everywhere, and look under your beds. And Vietnam and Korea and the wars there. And all of a sudden, he achieves this breakthrough that enables him to recognize that the whole Cold War was a racket, a national security state racket. And of course, he starts moving America in a different direction. He had to be taken out. And that's our book at FFF, JFK's War Against the National Security State, why Kennedy was assassinated. And as you know, I've done a lot of work in this area, but they had to get rid of him. But no president since then would dare buck him. We thought Trump was going to do it. He talked about the deep state, draining the swamp. He gets into office again, and he just repeats the same thing. He's been absorbed by them. But I don't think he's the problem. I think the problem is these evil systems that have been permitted to be attached to our federal governmental system and have their tentacles all embroiled in the whole federal governmental system, including the public school system that is at the center of this indoctrination that sometimes keeps people enwrapped in this encasement, concrete encasement, till the day they die.
And, it's interesting because I think sentimentally, our guest is Jacob Hornberger, founder and president of the Future of Freedom Foundation. Find them at fff.org. And I will tell you a little bit more in just a minute to show you where you can find them on X. And if you get the opportunity, get some of their publications because they're remarkable. And Jacob, it's interesting because sentimentally, I think about, as you mentioned, school and whatever the edifice is that's been built up like like the Sand King ants from a Outer Limits episode. They build these big buildings, the Sand Kings, these ant creatures, and they continue to grow. And I think one of the things is sentimentally, once people get normalcy bias to the idea of, well, government does education, then you get the attacks, which are it's a binary thing for them. They say, so you're opposed to educating kids? It's like, no. What do you first? How are you assuming they're getting educated properly? That's a subjective point in the first place, and you're not allowing the market to test that. And second, why do you think that in opposing stealing money from my neighbor to put it into a unionized government bureaucracy, why do you think that that is somehow education in the first place? It's really remarkable. And the same thing applies to defense, whether it's the argument for the state, which is, from a voluntarist standpoint. I often try to point out, even though John Locke brought up the idea that, you were born with natural rights and I'm born with natural rights. And supposedly the government is formed to prevent human beings from aggressing against each other and harming each other. Of course, there's a catch-22 there. The logic circuit is circular, because in order to do that, there is an agency that will claim that it can take your stuff and tell you it will hurt you if you don't give it up. So, the anarchist voluntarist in me says philosophically that doesn't work. Politically, I would be satisfied if they could get closer to what the founders envisioned: smaller organizations, or perhaps even go with back in the old days to the Articles of Confederation, or look at what Hans Hermann Hoppe has discussed. There's validity in talking about the traditions of the old monarchies, or the old Viking system, as Rothbard discussed, or the ancient Irish system of the Brehon Law with the tribes. Might not be able to get back to it, but I find those things really fulfilling. I love talking about those things because they let you see the perspective of just how far things have gone with the normalcy bias, I think.
Well, they haven't. My favorite period of time in history is around 1880 to 1910. To me, it had to be a terribly exciting time in which to live. It's not a perfectly libertarian society, and there's always problems in life. There's death, there's suffering, and so forth. But this period of time is really remarkable. When you look at the whole stretch of centuries of human history, there's this 30-year period or so in which, get this, no income tax. Now, you had a federal government, no question about it. Throughout the 19th century, you had a federal government. No income tax, no IRS, immigration controls to speak of. They were starting to put in the Ellis Island system, but before that, open immigration. Federal Reserve, paper money. They had gold and silver coins as their official money, so there's no inflation. No drug war. Everything was legalized. No alcohol laws. What else? No economic regulations. No minimum wage laws.
Right.
No gun control. This, to me, no national security state. They had a small basic military. So the federal government didn't have any money. They survived on excise taxes and some tariffs, but it was like 2% or 1% of what they do today. You never saw a government official, federal official, except maybe the postman, the mailman or something. But to me, they showed that this is possible. When people say to me, Jacob, you're living in la la land, you can't ever achieve that. They proved that you could achieve a society with those things. No foreign wars, no coups, assassinations, invasions, occupations. It's remarkable. Inventions were coming into existence every day. Charity was going almost out of control. This is how the museums, the opera houses, the libraries, the hospitals got built by people who were becoming wealthy. You had poor people going from rags to riches in 1, 2, or 3 generations.
Amazing.
So that, it really is amazing, because you had the structure of a government, but it was a limited government republic. And to me, that's my goal, is to let's achieve what they achieved. Now, there was some bad thing happening because the statists were getting popular, the progressives, like the Spanish-American War in 1898, the Sherman Antitrust Act of 1890, the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882. But
Right.
These were exceptions to what the principles were. They were not part of the principles. So to me, you don't have to go all the way back to the Vikings. You go right here to the US of A, 1880 to 1910, and say, wow, that was a remarkable period of time.
Boy, I wish I had you as a professor, like teaching me classes or whatever. And I've always sort of wanted to do that with the show, like once every week or once every couple of weeks, do little segments on history and little things. Occasionally I'll read from a book or something like that. I'd love to talk to you about this, or about the work you've done on the national security state and JFK would be awesome in a series of conversations, Jacob. If you ever would be willing, I'd love it.
Oh,
And I know
love
you.
it.
Oh, great. All right. And I want to show also. I want to show the Russian production team. I want to put this out there because the Future Freedom Foundation is one of the best, everybody, and just established with great intent and has been fueled by great content. Future Freedom Foundation on X, find them under Future of Freedom. That's at Future of Freedom. And of course, it's fff.org. And you'll see right there, 7 hours ago, you have Future of Freedom Foundation in this week's Trump Watch. Jacob Hornberger at Hornberger_G. And I've got to make sure that I start sending out messages to that and retweeting that, discusses President Trump's threat to bomb Iran back into the Stone Age. Now, Jacob, before we go any further, I would be remiss as a host if I did not put up this from a man who went to high school a couple of years behind me in my same school. Do not follow. He has this symbol, which is it's a big one, but I want to read this. This on X. This is a comment on X, and he has, of course, the picture of Father Guido Sarducci from Saturday Night Live. It says, April 7th, 2026, 6:32 p.m. Based on conversations with Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif and Field Marshal Asim Munir of Pakistan, and wherein they requested that I hold off the destructive force being sent tonight to Iran, and subject to the Islamic Republic of Iran agreeing to the complete, immediate, and safe opening of the Strait of Hormuz, I agreed to suspend the bombing and attack of Iran for a period of 2 weeks. This will be a double-sided ceasefire. The reason for doing so is that we have already something. I think he's probably going to say already established a regime change. But that, thank you, do not follow. Thank you for getting that out there. I appreciate that. And people can check that out on the stream, the at Garth Goldsmith stream. And I'm sure that it's floating around elsewhere. Or follow, do not follow. If you probably have retweeted, re-X that. So that seems to be the status right now. And of course, it's all basically just a mafia don saying, well, I'm going to hold off, shaking down your candy store for another 2 weeks.
Well, does that mean that he's not going to do his bombing attack tonight? Is that?
Yeah, it looks like I'm gonna. I see over here on X. I'll show you my X feed. Sabby Savs, Sabrina Salvati is based in Boston. She's a left winger, but she does a very good show on YouTube, which is very pro peace and has had a lot of good people on. She recently had Saeed Mirandi on from Iran. From wherever you can get his Iran signal to get on the internet. As she says, breaking Iran ceasefire, Patrick Henningsen is joining her. He's from 21st Century Wire. He does another good job. So that I'll just put in ceasefire here.
But is that implying that Iran has agreed to a ceasefire?
And that's what I wonder. I don't understand why they would agree to a ceasefire because they had not agreed to that yet,
Yeah, I mean, I think their position is sound from what they wanted. They want a termination of this war forever and no more bombing of Iran ever, and lift the sanctions, leave us alone type thing. And interestingly enough, that's what Kennedy agreed to as part of the Cuban Missile Crisis, which was his really death knell, that he agreed that the U.S. would never bomb Cuba. At least that was the implication. I mean, it would apply only to him as president, but future subsequent presidents complied with that agreement, but they hated him for it. But so you can understand the Iranians saying, okay, let's have a deal where we don't have a 6 month ceasefire because you're going to start bombing us 6 months afterward.
Exactly. And who can trust them? Who can trust them?
You can't trust them. I mean, notice that they entered into negotiations as a ruse to start assassinating and bombing the negotiators,
right?
The leaders.
Yeah, it doesn't.
It's weird. So, but I said in Trump Watch this morning, I said I don't think Trump is going to go through with this. I think he's bluffing. And when the Pope weighed in, I think that was probably a determining factor too. Weighed in against Trump and the Pentagon and so forth. So Trump, to his credit, after vowing to do this, has ceased and desisted, which is a good thing. I don't know whether this is a negotiated agreement or whether this is just unilateral action on the part of Trump. But either way, this is a good thing.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Until I see maybe an official statement from Tehran, um, Trump is constantly saying things like, "Well, there's a new regime, we have negotiations," and then the Iranians are saying, "No, we haven't negotiated at all. What are you talking about? Why would we bother?" Arashki comes out and he's like, he comes on television, he says, "No, we're not negotiating." But as you say, we can hear it from Trump, which either way, it's a positive. If he's waiting and he's not going to attack, at least there's not going to be death and destruction for these people tonight. And then if he's depicting it as something which it is not, and then we hear later from the Iranians, look, we didn't participate in this. This is unilateral from Trump making this decision. It's still a positive one way or the other, because Trump now has shown that he had to back off, and then he was just spouting rhetoric to smooth it over. What do you think? Do you have any? I usually don't speculate very much, but this is such a terrible, terrible thing that is going on, and it's backed by so many lies. Do you think they'll resolve this? And if they do, what do you think it would be?
Well, for one thing, if this is not a negotiated agreement, I think Trump has backed himself into a real corner, because issuing this ultimatum and vowing that he was going to go forward with it at 8 p.m., if he unilaterally backs off from this and says, well, I'll give it another 2 weeks, he has totally weakened his position, because people are going to say, well, if you didn't go through with it this time, why should we be scared of you 2 weeks from now? And, he's moved this deadline over and over again. At some point, people say, what are you doing? I mean, why should we be scared when you keep moving your own deadline? So he's brought himself his own troubles with this thing. If this is not part of a negotiated agreement, my hunch is that it's not, because it seems to me like the Iranians were saying, we're not going to just keep going through this temporary ceasefires. You ask a very interesting question, is how does this thing end? And I've sat here and really pondered this. I don't know how this ends, because clearly Trump, now the Israelis are a different situation of there, but clearly Trump does not want to walk away. He's got this Strait of Hormuz problem. He could just walk away like he said he was going to do and say, this is Europe's problem. They're the ones that are really dependent on this, or China or whatever. I'll just walk away and come home. I won. He says he won. He destroyed their whole military. But he can't do it. It's like a tar baby. And so the Iranians are saying, we're not going to open up the Strait of Hormuz. So how does it end?
Yeah,
I don't know.
I don't know. It's interesting, Jacob, because I think they were counting on this mission, which clearly they messed up, to go into Natanz or Isfahan, the two nuclear sites. I think they were trying to go into Isfahan and get something. Who knows what it was? I mean, the whole thing seems like something out of a G.I. Joe cartoon thing from when I was too old to even watch G.I. Joe cartoons. But it's. I mean, Alistair MacLean wouldn't have written about this, to put it in a better sense. But it seems like they were counting on some sort of rhetorical firepower to back up some success where they could have had this mission, but the mission went wrong. They did see these guys, these pilots, get stranded, and these pilots had a lot of resources devoted to their rescue because they were on a mission on something that had to do with those nuclear sites. And
interesting.
So, yeah, I think Trump got maybe put into a corner here. And let me ask you this. Do you think 2 weeks of a ceasefire, because many people were saying, look, why would Iran give a ceasefire? That just allows, just like Ukraine constantly asking for ceasefires, it just allows them to get rearmed. And the United States is depleting its weapons. The Israelis are depleting what they're getting from the United States and us. And so why would the Iranians agree to a ceasefire when they want an end to hostilities? A ceasefire would just allow the U.S. to replenish their weapons. But I think 2 weeks might not be enough, to get the stuff over there. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, if sometimes it's good to try to put yourself in the shoes of the other side and try to figure out what are they thinking. This was one of Kennedy's virtues, and that's how he reach the settlement of the Cuban Missile Crisis. He says, what is it the Soviets are really looking for here? What is it the Cubans are really looking for? Well, they were looking for protection because the Pentagon, the CIA wanted to invade again. And Kennedy figured that out and says, okay, I'll give you what you want. I won't let them invade again. Okay, we'll remove our missiles. And so you ask yourself, what is it that the Iranians want? Well, I don't think they want just a temporary ceasefire so that they can go through this 6 months from now and 6 months from now. My understanding, Gardner, is that they had this agreement that was made under Obama where they agreed not to produce nuclear weapons. They had inspectors, international inspectors verifying this.
Yeah. I mean, they had it all. And they
had it all.
And not only that, like I've actually got some recordings of Mike Waltz in front of the UN. And everything that Mike Waltz says is either a lie or he says, we want this and this and this and this, which they already had. They had that under the joint, the JCPOA. And they had it all. And then Donald Trump dumped it. And the Iranians even stuck with the agreement for an extra year before they started to refine their nuclear materials beyond the percentage they had agreed to under the JCPOA. The Joint Cooperative Plan of Action, I think it was. And so they had it. So now they're going back. It's so ridiculous. And the other thing, too, that I should mention is they're constantly berating Barack Obama. You get these MAGA folks who are big fans of Donald Trump, and they just don't seem to understand that when Obama allowed for the unfreezing of, I think it was $6 billion to go back to Iran, or it might have been more than that, that was Iranian money that they had been holding since the 70s.
Right.
It's amazing. It's truly remarkable. I do see over here. Let me just show you.
Let me just make a comment about that. That I just noticed that I think it was France that is repatriating their gold from the United States, and Germany is doing the same, because they realize that the U.S. grabs people's money when it gets mad at them, and so they're saying, we don't want our gold sitting in the United States.
Right. You remember when the Germans tried to do that when Obama was president after they went through with the American Recovery Act, and the Germans, the West German money, the West German gold was in supposedly in the New York Fed, and the West Germans said, hey, could you give that back? And the Fed said, no, we can't do it right now.
I didn't know about that. Oh, that's funny.
Yeah,
I wonder where it was, why they couldn't do it.
I know. I just kept thinking of, like, was Arik Goldfinger around? What happened? You know?
Yeah. I mean, if I were a foreign regime, I wouldn't keep my money in the United States. I mean, the U.S. government's a thief. Exactly. It takes whatever it can get his hands on with any excuse. And I'd get my money out of this country if I were part of a foreign country.
It's like that old Robert Wagner TV show, It Takes a Thief. Remember that show?
Yeah.
And I remember the theme. He goes, let me get this straight. You want me to steal? That was the theme. So we'll have Donald Trump or Mike Johnson or any other congressman. You want me to steal? And the other thing. I'll show you. I'll just show you real quick. This is one of the things that's up on X. RBG4LIF. I don't know what that is. It must be a network or something like that. Red. I don't know. Red, black, green. It must be something for Iran. Trump walks back threat to destroy Iranian civilization. The U.S. president has announced a 2-week ceasefire to finalize a peace agreement with Tehran. And so there you go. So there are a few other things there. But yeah, Jacob, boy, what a time to be together talking about this. And I hate to say that because these times shouldn't be here. We should be able to talk about going bowling and playing darts and reading stuff by Rothbard or Bastiat or a great novel by whoever, Zane Grey Western, who knows, right? We shouldn't have to talk about this stuff and say, boy, what a time to be together on this time. I don't want to have times like this to be together. That's not the stuff I want, Yeah,
but this is part of the racket. This is what they want. In fact, I said last summer when there was the Epstein revolt within the MAGA movement against Trump,
yeah,
I pointed out, get ready for a foreign war. because this is what the Roman emperors used to do. They'd start up the war so that all the attention is on the war. The revolt is quelled because everybody's being patriotic, rally to the flag. And I said, get ready, it's coming.
Yeah.
And then the Venezuela thing came up, but that fizzled out. Epstein was still on the front pages. But this one has wiped Epstein off. The revolt is over. Everybody's excited about saving the pilot and bombing the country and killing people and annihilating people. And this is what they want. This is the bread and butter of the national security state and its empire. Keep people afraid, new official enemies, new crises, more chaos, crisis. This is what they thrive on, to keep us safe. And so this is all part of the racket that they've got our attention over there in Iran.
And the last thing I'll mention before, as they say on Redacted, before I let you go, the last thing I'll mention, Jacob Hornberger of FFF.org, is I want to mention, Jacob, last night, you just reminded me that, when I come out of the Russian bunker here with the producers, there's something to be said of the what would I call it? The spirit of scholarship. And I mentioned zeitgeist before. There's been a paradigm shift away from, I think, sitting in front of a book or sitting in front of text and immersing oneself in that and the satisfaction of that. And you reminded me of that because, you're talking about these historical events, and I know you've done writing on these things. And so last night I read a segment from this about the United States involvement in putting in the Shah. This is alphabetized basically by country where the United States did overthrows. And so this is by a man named Michael T. Lester. And it's very interesting. We are the bad guys. And so I just thought to myself, what I like to do on the show, at least once a week or twice a week, I read short stories every Friday. But I also like to open up the book and just read it. And that's one of the things that I hope people will do, to go over to FFF.org, get a book, get your new book on immigration, and then close off the other stimuli and then read it and have that one-way communication with the author, because there is still something really, really great about that. And to take the time to do it is its own reward. So I hope people will remember to go to FFF.org and check out. If I can convince 2 or 3 people right now to go over and get some of the material, sign up for your emails, I'll be very, very happy. I'll be psyched, be happy. So final thoughts before we let you go.
No, and thank you for those kind words. I mean, that's the way I look at it. Over the 36 years I've been running FFF, I've had people say, Jacob, why don't you soften up your message, soft pedal it a little bit? You'll get a lot more support. And I'm not interested in doing that. To be free, you don't strive to reform the tyranny or the serfdom under which we live. It might make life better. You just like life on the plantation for a slave in 19th century America could be made better, fewer lashings, better health care. But it's not freedom. And so our job at FFF is to raise people's vision to what a genuinely free society is. How do you get rid of these systems that deprive us of our freedom? Well, that means thinking at a higher level. And that's what we do. And if I look at our methodology as finding libertarians, not making them. I don't think you can convert people. I have good friends. I have family members that are non-libertarians. I have never been successful in converting them. And you can't convert people. I'm convinced. You can find people who are receptive to having this encasement of indoctrination cracked open. And then they say, now I see what you guys are all about. Now what? Then I think, okay, we've accomplished our job here when we can help open people's minds, because it is liberating. The fact that you and I can't change anything doesn't negate the fact that, I enjoy my life because I understand the chaos, the crisis. There's a cause for it. I know there's a solution to it, and I just keep promoting that solution. But I don't get all bent out of shape. God didn't give me the world to save. The world's in His hands.
Yeah, boy, it sounds so selfish, but I'm so lucky in the course of my life to have encountered you and encountered people like Richard and Sheldon Richman and Yeah, it's great. And you remind me,
Thank you.
you remind me, Jacob, there was a time I was doing a radio show here in New Hampshire, and I was driving home from Manchester, and I was at a stoplight where I would be taking a left turn, and there were two lanes that turned left and one lane that would have gone forward. And I don't know, I don't know if I was sort of sick or something like that. I can't remember. And a car, I remember, pulled up to my right, and I realized I had sort of a sour look on my face, and I changed that look, and I just looked over, and the guy was honking his horn, and I looked over and I smiled at the guy, and he went like this, and it was sort of dark. It's twilight. He went like this, so I rolled my window down. He said, "Are you Gardner Goldsmith?" Yeah, and I was like, and I was doing a radio show out of Manchester at the time, and I was like, "Yeah." He goes, yeah. He says, "God bless you, man." And I was like, "What?" And he goes, "I listened to your radio show."
That's awesome.
Yeah, and he said, "You changed the way I." He said, "You changed my thinking," and I was like, "Wow, that's really great. Thanks so much." He goes, "God bless you, man," or something like that, and that was nice, And it's like you say, we can't change. There's nobility in what there's just it's the right thing to do. That's all. It just feels great. So I'll leave it at that. Jacob, thank you. I hope people go to fff.org right now, check it out, and pick up some things, get on the email list. I'll remind people about that myself. So that'd be great.
No, thank you. The feeling's mutual, Gard. I love doing your show. I love everything you stand for and do. I mean, that's the nice thing about this movement, is encountering people that share your same worldview. It's just very gratifying, and it's interesting to be part of the Liberty conspiracy. I'd never thought about that before. Does that make us conspiracy theorists that we're part
of? Yes, indeed. You're going to be in the bunker with us sometime. We'll have our Russian vodka together.
No, I always have a good time. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to be on your show. Anytime.
Great stuff. And we'll keep praying for peace. Thanks, Jacob, so much. And as I say, live long and prosper.
Okay.
Thanks, Jacob. We'll talk to you later.
Bye-bye.
Appreciate it. You got it. Jacob Hornberger, everybody. Great guy. Really good man. And, of course, go to fff.org because he will be there. And thank you all for the comments. Great comments from everybody. And I was almost prepared. I was going to show the screen again to show some comments from folks. But let's go with our, there you go. Great comments from everybody. Thank you. Dustin says we should form a human chain around the White House like the Iranians are doing to the bridges and power plants. I wish I could form that around my wallet. Just a human chain around my bank account. Taxman, get away.